Andre Oliveira felt the familiar pulse of excitement mixed with nerves as he looked out at the towering buildings of the capital from the back seat of his car. The city was vast and imposing, bustling with energy and purpose. Andre, a seasoned economist with years of experience and a reputation that spanned beyond borders, was about to start his new role as the president of the central bank. It was a moment he had worked tirelessly for, a testament to his expertise, resilience, and vision for the country's economic future. Yet, sitting there in the shadow of these gleaming skyscrapers, he couldn't help but feel the weight of what was ahead. After checking into his new apartment in the heart of the city, Andre spent some time familiarizing himself with the space. It was modern, spacious, and conveniently close to his office. Still, it felt a bit cold, a far cry from his family home where he had grown up surrounded by warm voices, laughter, and the comforting presence of loved ones. He knew he'd adjust, though. The capital was his home now, at least for the foreseeable future. As Andre unpacked his bags, his thoughts drifted to his journey to this position. It had not been a straight line. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, he had learned early on that his future would depend on his determination and ability to navigate through challenges. He was the first in his family to graduate from college, and later, the first to receive a doctorate. Even with his credentials and talent, he knew the road hadn't been paved smoothly. He had faced skepticism, doubt, and outright prejudice more times than he cared to count. But each challenge had only made him stronger and more committed to his goals. Andre's thoughts returned to the present as he reminded himself of the important meeting scheduled for the following day. This wasn't just any meeting. It was the launch event of a critical project that he had been championing for years. The project would bring significant advancements in financial accessibility and transparency, directly impacting the lives of everyday citizens. For Andre, this was more than just economic strategy. It was a way to bridge the gap between the elite and the working class, a step toward creating a financial system that was fair for everyone. That night, he prepared his notes, going over each detail meticulously. As he reviewed his talking points, he felt a surge of pride in what he had accomplished. Here he was, about to lead one of the most influential financial institutions in the country. He had worked hard to get here, and despite the challenges he knew he would face, he was ready to rise above them. His colleagues in the banking world would soon realize that he was here not just to maintain the status quo, but to bring meaningful change. The following morning, Andre dressed in his favorite tailored suit, opting for a subtle tie that added a touch of color. He wanted to make a good impression, but also felt it was important to remain true to himself. With one final look in the mirror, he squared his shoulders and reminded himself that he belonged here. No amount of prejudice or doubt from others could diminish the work he had put in or the position he had rightfully earned. As he left his apartment, he couldn't shake a slight feeling of unease. Although he tried to dismiss it as simple first-day nerves, there was a nagging voice in the back of his mind reminding him of past incidents where he had been underestimated, dismissed, or even actively hindered because of who he was. But he pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the importance of the work ahead. The car ride to the meeting venue gave him time to review his notes one last time. He looked out the window, watching the city rush by, feeling the usual calm that settled over him whenever he faced a challenge. He reminded himself that his very presence at this level was a statement that black men could and should hold positions of power in spaces where they were often underrepresented. His confidence was renewed as the car pulled up to the building, and he stepped out, briefcase in hand, ready to step into his role fully. As he approached the front doors of the grand building where the meeting would take place, Andre noticed a group of people in sharp suits passing through security without a second glance. He took a deep breath, adjusting his tie, and made his way to the entrance. He felt proud, ready to start his first day with a clear head and a steady resolve. Andre could feel the weight of his ambition and his vision for the central bank's future fueling his every step. He had no way of knowing what would unfold once he stepped inside, but he was certain of one thing. He would let nothing and no one diminish his purpose. This day would be the beginning of something monumental. And as he walked toward those doors, he reminded himself of all the reasons he was here, standing tall, ready to make a difference. As Andre stepped into the grand lobby, he took in the sight of polished marble floors, high ceilings, and the subtle hum of conversations around him. The room was bustling with activity as executives and staff moved with purpose, barely glancing in his direction. Andre felt a rush of excitement, mixed with a hint of nervous energy. This was a day he had prepared for, the culmination of years of hard work and perseverance. He walked up to the security desk, gave a polite nod, and introduced himself. Andre Oliveira. I'm here for the meeting with the Financial Advisory Board. The security guard barely looked up from his screen. Do you have a visitor's pass? He asked in a curt tone. Andre explained. I'm here to attend the meeting as the new president of the central bank. I should be on the list. The guard finally looked at him, his gaze sharp and assessing. One moment, he muttered before glancing at his screen. The pause stretched longer than Andre expected, and he noticed the guard's eyes narrowing in skepticism. After what felt like an eternity, the guard shook his head. I don't see your name here. Andre felt a small pang of irritation, but kept his composure. He had encountered this before. The hesitant looks, the questioning gazes. But he chose to respond calmly, not wanting to make a scene. Could you double-check, please? It should be under Oliveira. The guard huffed, clearly annoyed. He typed a few more keys, then shook his head. Not seeing anything. You'll need to step aside while I handle the other arrivals. As Andre moved to the side, he watched as other men in suits, most of whom were white, passed by without issue. He noticed that they didn't even have to announce themselves. They were waved through without question. Each interaction was quick, efficient, and respectful, a courtesy that he was not being afforded. A sinking feeling started to settle in his chest, but he pushed it aside, determined to stay focused. Minutes passed, and Andre grew more uneasy as he waited. He watched as attendees arrived, many of whom he recognized from years of working in finance. He was tempted to wave someone down, to clear up this misunderstanding, but he hesitated. Would they recognize him without knowing his new title? He knew some of them by reputation, but had only met a few in person. He couldn't shake the feeling that, even here, in this high-stakes environment, he was an outsider being kept at arm's length. Finally, he decided to approach the front desk again. Clearing his throat, he spoke in a firm but polite tone. Excuse me. I understand there might have been an error with my name in the system, but I'm here to represent the central bank. It's critical I make it to this meeting on time. The guard frowned, looking visibly irritated. Look, sir, he said, his tone laced with impatience. I already told you, if you're not on the list, you can't go in. This is a secure building, and I don't have time to keep checking. Are you sure you're in the right place? Andre's patience was wearing thin, but he managed to keep his tone even. Yes, I'm sure, he said, feeling the weight of frustration pressing against him. Is there someone in management I could speak with? At that moment, a younger staff member walked by and caught sight of the exchange. He slowed, glancing curiously between Andre and the guard. Andre recognized him. Marcus, a junior analyst he had met during a networking event some time ago. Andre gave him a small nod, hoping Marcus would recognize him. But Marcus's reaction was far from friendly. Instead, he gave Andre a dismissive look, chuckling as he shook his head. Didn't think they'd start letting just anyone wander in here, he muttered under his breath, loud enough for Andre to hear. The sting of that comment hit hard, but Andre held back, refusing to give any sign of discomfort. Instead, he kept his eyes steady, determined not to show the frustration building inside him. He knew that reacting wouldn't help, but it was becoming increasingly clear that he wasn't going to be treated with the same respect or consideration as the other attendees. Several more minutes passed as he waited, and Andre could feel the meeting time approaching. He checked his watch, realizing that he was running late, something he had meticulously tried to avoid. He had spent years building a reputation as a punctual, dedicated professional, and the idea of arriving late to his own meeting filled him with frustration. Finally, another attendee, an older executive whom Andre recognized, walked by, glancing at him with surprise. "Andre," he asked, stopping to shake his hand. "It's good to see you. Congratulations on the new role." Andre felt a rush of relief. "Thank you. I've been having some trouble getting through security. They seem to think I'm not on the list." The executive raised an eyebrow, looking over at the guard, who now seemed visibly uncomfortable. "Nonsense. Andre Oliveira is our new central bank president. Let him through." The guard's expression shifted, his previous stern demeanor melting into awkwardness. He mumbled an apology, clearly uncomfortable now that he realized his mistake. "I'm sorry, Mr. Oliveira. It seems there was an error in the system." Andre gave a tight nod, choosing not to dwell on the moment. He walked past the security desk with a mixture of relief and frustration. As he entered the elevator, he could feel the anger simmering beneath the surface, but he reminded himself to stay focused on the meeting. He had a job to do, a role that went far beyond this isolated incident. As the elevator ascended, Andre took a deep breath, pushing away the discomfort of the morning's encounter. He was here to make a difference, to lead, and to bring about changes that would shape the financial future of the country. And no amount of dismissive treatment would shake his resolve. As Andre stepped into the conference room, he took a brief moment to steady himself. The room was large, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the bustling cityscape outside. Around the table sat some of the most influential figures in the country's financial sector, a mix of seasoned bankers, economists, and corporate leaders. Conversations were underway, some quiet, others boisterous, and there was an undeniable air of confidence, an unspoken understanding that everyone seated here was part of an elite group with the power to shape the country's economic direction. Andre made his way to the front of the room, setting down his notes and glancing at the crowd. He noticed several heads turn, some with looks of mild surprise, others with a more guarded curiosity. He was aware that, as one of the few black faces in the room and now in such a prominent position, his presence was likely unexpected for some. After a moment, the chairman of the Financial Advisory Board, an older man with silver hair and an air of practiced authority, cleared his throat and raised his hand for silence. The room quieted almost immediately, and he gave a nod in Andre's direction. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce our new central bank president, Mr. Andre Oliveira. He brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to this role, and we're looking forward to hearing his perspective." Andre offered a polite nod, thanking the chairman before turning to address the room. He began by acknowledging the work of his predecessors, briefly outlining his vision for a stronger, more accessible financial system. He spoke about the importance of economic policies that prioritize both growth and equity, and he emphasized his commitment to promoting transparency and accountability within the banking system. As he spoke, Andre kept his tone professional and his gaze steady, making a conscious effort to meet the eyes of each board member. He noticed a mix of reactions, some nodding in agreement, others listening with crossed arms or unreadable expressions. A few seemed genuinely engaged, while others appeared skeptical, perhaps doubting his qualifications or approach. Andre knew he had to win them over, to show them that his intentions were not only well-meaning, but firmly rooted in his expertise and dedication to the institution. After his opening remarks, Andre invited questions from the board. Almost immediately, a man to his left, a high-ranking executive from one of the country's largest private banks, raised his hand. His tone was polite, but tinged with a hint of condescension. "Mr. Oliveira, your emphasis on financial accessibility is commendable. But aren't you concerned that pushing for such broad reforms might destabilize the system we've worked so hard to build?" Andre gave a slight nod, acknowledging the concern. "I understand the importance of maintaining stability, and that's a priority I take seriously. But we must also consider the long-term health of our economy. A system that serves only a select few is ultimately unsustainable. My goal is to ensure that our policies benefit all citizens, not just those who are already in positions of privilege." The man gave a tight-lipped smile, clearly unconvinced, but he said nothing further. Andre sensed that this was only the beginning, that he would have to face more resistance, perhaps even direct opposition, as he moved forward with his plans. He could feel the weight of their skepticism, but he knew that earning their respect would be a gradual process. He would let his work speak for itself. Another board member, a woman with sharp eyes and an impressive resume in international finance, spoke up. "Mr. Oliveira, given the current global economic climate, do you think it's wise to push for such ambitious reforms? Shouldn't we be focusing on more conservative measures to protect our interests?" Andre appreciated the directness of her question. "I agree that we need to be cautious, but I also believe that in times of uncertainty, it's crucial to have a clear vision. The reforms I'm proposing are meant to strengthen our financial foundation. By addressing systemic issues now, we can prevent crises down the line. It's about creating a stable and resilient system that can withstand future challenges." The woman nodded thoughtfully, and Andre sensed a glimmer of understanding, if not outright agreement. He knew that building trust would take time, but moments like this gave him hope. He had expected some resistance, but he also knew that persistence and a steady hand would eventually help him gain their confidence. As the meeting continued, Andre fielded more questions, each one a test of his resolve and expertise. He was aware that many of these board members were not used to seeing someone like him in this position, and he felt the unspoken challenge in their inquiries. But with each question, he responded calmly, maintaining his professionalism and reinforcing his commitment to his goals. When the session finally came to a close, Andre felt a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. He had navigated the first hurdle, answering their questions with honesty and confidence. As the attendees began to gather their belongings, some approached him with polite nods or brief words of acknowledgement. A few even offered congratulations, though their words seemed guarded, as if they were still reserving judgment. The chairman approached him last, giving him a firm handshake. "Good work today, Andre. You held your ground well." "Thank you," Andre replied, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "I look forward to working closely with everyone on the board." The chairman gave a curt nod. "I have no doubt you'll make an impact here. But be prepared. The path you've chosen isn't an easy one." Andre understood the underlying message. His position would come with challenges, not only because of the weight of his role, but also due to the unspoken biases he would have to navigate. But he was ready. He had come this far, and he had no intention of letting obstacles deter him. As he left the meeting room, Andre felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was only the beginning, and he knew that he would have to prove himself continuously. But for the first time since he had arrived in the capital, he felt a surge of hope. He had faced resistance, yes, but he had also seen glimmers of potential allies. People who, given time, might come to see the value in his vision. Walking back through the lobby, Andre could feel the stares, some curious, others indifferent, but he held his head high. He was here to make a difference, and he was prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. The day after Andre's introduction to the board, he was scheduled for an exclusive interview with one of the country's leading financial news networks. He had prepared for it meticulously, knowing that it was a chance not only to outline his policies, but also to address the public, the people who would ultimately be impacted by his plans. He hoped that by connecting with them directly, he could garner some support beyond the boardroom walls. The studio was buzzing when he arrived, with producers, cameramen, and assistants all moving purposefully, preparing for the live broadcast. He was greeted by a young assistant who escorted him to the makeup chair before showing him to the interview set. Andre appreciated the professionalism around him, but couldn't ignore the curious glances he received. He was aware of his position as a new figure on the national stage, and as always, he was reminded that he stood out. The interviewer, Carla Mendez, was known for her tough, no-nonsense style. She'd gained a reputation for cutting through vague answers, pushing her guests for specifics, and holding them accountable on air. Andre knew she wouldn't hold back on him, and he respected that. Carla greeted him with a polite smile as he took his seat across from her under the bright studio lights. "Mr. Oliveira, welcome, and congratulations on your new role," she began, her voice warm but professional. "Thank you, Carla," Andre replied, offering a friendly smile. "It's an honor to be here." She didn't waste any time, diving straight into her questions. "Let's start with what's on everyone's mind, your economic vision for the country. You've mentioned in previous statements that you want to make the financial system more accessible. What does that look like in practical terms?" Andre leaned forward slightly, his tone measured but passionate. "In practical terms, Carla, it means creating opportunities for all citizens to participate in and benefit from the economy. We're talking about fairer lending practices, access to banking services in underserved areas, and educational programs that can help people understand and make informed decisions about their finances. These are steps that help build a stronger, more inclusive financial foundation for the country." Carla nodded, taking notes before moving on. But there are critics who argue that these kinds of reforms are overly idealistic, that they could risk destabilizing the very system they're meant to improve. How do you respond to that? Andre expected the question and had prepared for it. "I understand the concerns," he said calmly, "and it's true that any change involves risk. But I believe that the greater risk lies in maintaining the status quo. A financial system that leaves behind large portions of our population isn't sustainable in the long run. Stability is important, but so is adaptability. Our economy must evolve if we're to remain competitive and resilient on a global scale." Carla's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing his answer. "You're asking for quite a shift in mindset. Do you think you'll have the support to implement these changes?" "It will take time," Andre admitted, "and I know there will be resistance. But I'm confident that, as people start to see the benefits, both socially and economically, support will grow. This isn't about radical change overnight. It's about steady, responsible progress." Carla continued with more probing questions, touching on his stance on corporate tax policy, banking regulations, and his views on foreign investment. Andre answered each one thoughtfully, making sure to avoid jargon and speak in terms that the average viewer could understand. He wanted people to feel that he was on their side, that his priorities aligned with theirs. After about 20 minutes, Carla shifted her approach, moving from economic policies to his personal experiences. You're breaking new ground as the first black president of the central bank in this country's history. That's significant. What does that mean to you personally? Andre paused, considering his words carefully. It means a lot, Carla. Growing up, I never saw people who looked like me in positions like this. And I know that my being here sends a message to a lot of young people that they can achieve the same, that they belong. But it's also a responsibility. I'm aware that there are extra eyes on me, waiting to see if I can deliver, and I welcome that. I want to prove that diversity and talent go hand in hand, and that the more inclusive we are, the stronger we become. Carla's face softened slightly at his answer, a rare glimpse of empathy in her usually firm demeanor. Well said, Mr. Oliveira. Before we wrap up, one last question. If you could sum up your vision for the future in a single sentence, what would it be? Andre didn't hesitate. My vision is a financial system that serves everyone. A system where success is measured not just by profits, but by how well it empowers people. Carla nodded, smiling slightly as she turned back to the camera. Thank you, Mr. Oliveira, for sharing your insights with us today. We look forward to seeing how your leadership unfolds. As the camera lights dimmed, Carla leaned over and shook Andre's hand. Good job, she said quietly. You handled those questions well. Andre felt a wave of relief. Thank you, Carla. I appreciate the chance to speak directly to people. With the interview over, Andre left the studio feeling a sense of accomplishment. He knew it wouldn't reach everyone right away. Change rarely did. But he hoped that his words resonated with viewers, sparking curiosity and maybe a bit of hope. As he exited the building and walked toward his car, he received a text from his assistant. The message was simple, but it made him smile. Great job, sir. People are already talking. Andre knew that his journey was only beginning. The real work lay ahead, in the halls of power where old ideas would clash with new perspectives. But for the first time since taking on this role, he felt that he wasn't alone. He had reached people today, and he knew that, slowly, momentum would build. Stepping into his car, Andre took a deep breath. The road was long, and the challenges were many, but he was ready. He was more than ready. Returning to the central bank's headquarters after his interview, Andre could feel a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. Word of his interview had spread quickly through the office, and the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. For many employees, he had not only represented a new vision for the bank, but had also shown them a different kind of leader, one who wasn't afraid to stand up for his values in a public arena. His popularity within the organization was growing, especially among younger staff members and those who felt they had been overlooked in the past. As he stepped into his office, Andre's assistant Pedro was there with a stack of reports. The board is impressed with how you handled the interview, sir. You've got a lot of people talking around here, Pedro said with a smile. Thank you, Pedro, Andre replied, nodding. I'm just glad the message came across clearly. Pedro's face grew more serious as he handed Andre a memo. There's something else you should know. Apparently, some of the senior board members weren't thrilled with a few of your comments. They see some of the reforms you discussed as disruptive. Andre took a moment to absorb this information. He knew from the beginning that his ideas would challenge the status quo, but he hadn't expected the pushback to come this quickly. The tension between his vision and the traditional mindset within the board was becoming more apparent. The following day, Andre attended his first full board meeting as president. As he entered the elegant conference room, with its polished wood table and walls adorned with portraits of past leaders, he could feel a subtle resistance among some of the board members, particularly the older ones. They greeted him politely, but there was a certain stiffness to their demeanor. The meeting began, and Andre observed as each department head presented updates on their areas of focus. Finally, it was his turn to address the board. He knew this was a critical moment, not only to share his vision, but to see how much support or opposition he truly had. "Thank you, everyone, for your reports," Andre began, looking around the room and meeting each member's eyes. "Now, I'd like to discuss a few initiatives I believe could significantly enhance our financial system's reach and effectiveness." He explained his plans for improved financial literacy programs aimed at underserved communities, policies to encourage banks to lower barriers for small businesses, and measures that would push large financial institutions to operate more transparently. As he spoke, he noticed some board members exchanging glances, and a few of them wore expressions of skepticism. One board member, Senor Vasconcelos, finally interrupted. "Mr. Oliveira, while your vision is commendable, we must ensure that these policies do not destabilize our established institutions. We can't afford to experiment recklessly with the economy." Andre listened patiently before responding. "I understand your concerns, Senor Vasconcelos, but I would argue that these aren't reckless experiments. They are calculated, necessary steps to modernize our system. We need a financial framework that doesn't only serve those who are already privileged, but also provides a foundation for those who aspire to build something." Another board member, Dona Clara, spoke up with a softer tone. "Andre, no one here doubts your intentions. But do you truly believe that these ideas will be accepted by the larger financial community? These changes might make waves that we can't control." Andre leaned forward, his tone steady but firm. "Dona Clara, I believe that if we don't take these steps, we risk losing the public's trust altogether. People are looking to us for leadership. They want to see that the central bank is committed to a fairer, more inclusive future. And I intend to prove that we can make these changes responsibly." Silence fell over the room. Andre knew he had presented a bold vision, and it would take time for everyone to fully accept it. Yet, he could see in the eyes of a few board members a glimmer of understanding, or perhaps of curiosity. After the meeting, as the board members filed out, a few younger members approached him privately, expressing their support. They shared stories of friends and family members who struggled with limited financial resources and expressed hope that his policies could make a real difference. That evening, Andre sat alone in his office, reflecting on the day. The boardroom resistance hadn't surprised him, but he knew that these early confrontations would be crucial in determining his path forward. His leadership wasn't just about implementing policies. It was about shifting mindsets, challenging traditions, and breaking barriers that had long held back meaningful progress. With renewed determination, Andre opened his laptop to prepare a presentation on his next initiative. He knew that there would be more resistance and even stronger pushback in the coming weeks. But he was ready. His vision extended beyond his position. It was for everyone who felt left out of the system. And for that vision, Andre was willing to face whatever opposition lay ahead. In the days following the board meeting, Andre's reforms gained traction within the central bank. Word of his vision began to circulate through the organization, sparking interest and discussion among employees from all levels. It wasn't just a topic of curiosity. It was becoming a point of pride. Some staff members even began referring to it as the Oliveira Plan, a set of policies focused on fairness and inclusivity that, to many, marked a refreshing change from the bank's traditionally conservative stance. Andre continued to meet with board members individually, hoping to address their concerns in a more personal setting. He knew that convincing everyone would be a gradual process, but he was determined to explain his reasoning and show that the risks were carefully considered and manageable. He also encouraged open discussion, asking each member to share their own ideas on how the bank could better serve the public. These conversations weren't always easy, but he noticed that some board members, especially the younger ones, were beginning to warm up to his ideas. Meanwhile, news of Andre's plans began to attract public attention. Financial journalists and economic analysts wrote about the central bank's potential shift in focus, speculating on the impact it could have on the country's financial landscape. Some hailed it as a long overdue change, while others were more cautious, warning that it could bring unforeseen consequences. Andre welcomed the discussion, seeing it as an opportunity to explain his vision to a broader audience. One afternoon, as Andre was working on a detailed proposal for the next phase of the Oliveira plan, his assistant, Pedro, entered the office with a cautious expression. "Sir, you should see this," Pedro said, holding out his tablet. Andre took it, reading the headline of an opinion piece that had just been published, "The Radical Reforms of Central Bank President Andre Oliveira, Bold or Reckless?" The article outlined both the potential benefits and risks of Andre's policies, but it leaned heavily into the reckless angle, citing concerns from anonymous sources within the financial sector who questioned his qualifications and hinted that his background might not have prepared him for such a critical role. The piece went as far as to suggest that Andre was out of touch with the financial elite, implying that his ideas were idealistic and impractical. Andre felt a pang of frustration. He had expected criticism, but seeing it laid out so bluntly was a reminder of the deeply rooted biases he was up against. The implication that his background somehow made him less capable stung, but he refused to let it deter him. Later that evening, Andre sat in his office, reflecting on the article. He could hear the faint hum of activity in the hallways as the cleaning staff moved through the building, and he realized he was one of the last people left in the office. The loneliness of leadership weighed on him, but he reminded himself of why he had taken on this role in the first place. Just as he was about to call it a night, he received a message from Carla Mendez, the journalist who had interviewed him earlier. She had seen the article and wanted to offer him an opportunity to respond in a follow-up interview. "Mr. Oliveira," her message read, "I believe your side of the story deserves to be heard. If you're interested, we can schedule something later this week." Andre considered it for a moment. He knew that addressing the article publicly could either reinforce his message or open him up to even more scrutiny. But he also knew that staying silent would leave others to define his narrative. The next morning, he replied to Carla's message, agreeing to the interview. He spent the following days preparing his response, carefully considering each point he wanted to make. He reached out to several colleagues who supported his vision, gathering concrete examples of how the Oliveira plan could positively impact the economy without compromising stability. By the time the interview day arrived, he felt ready. When Andre arrived at the studio, he noticed a few familiar faces among the crew from his previous interview. Carla greeted him warmly and led him to the set, where the cameras were already set up. The lights were bright, and he could feel the intensity of the moment as he took his seat. Once the interview began, Carla wasted no time addressing the article's criticisms. "Mr. Oliveira, I'm sure you've seen the recent opinion piece questioning your approach. How do you respond to those who say your reforms are too risky?" Andre met her gaze calmly. "Carla, I believe that the greatest risk we face is inaction. The financial system as it stands isn't accessible to everyone, and that's a problem. We need to make changes to ensure that more people have the opportunity to participate in and benefit from our economy. These aren't reckless ideas. They're thoughtful, calculated steps toward a more inclusive future. She nodded, allowing him to continue. And what do you say to those who question your background or suggest that you may be out of touch with the financial elite? Andre paused, choosing his words carefully. I think it's important to remember that diversity of experience is a strength, not a weakness. My background gives me a different perspective, one that I believe is valuable in understanding the needs of all citizens, not just a privileged few. I didn't get here by accident. I worked hard, just like everyone else in this field, and I believe that my experience has prepared me for this role. The rest of the interview proceeded smoothly, with Andre addressing each question directly and confidently. By the end, he felt he had conveyed his message clearly. As he left the studio, he couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. He had stood up for himself and for his vision, knowing that it wouldn't win everyone over immediately, but that it was a step in the right direction. Later that evening, as Andre read through messages of support from colleagues and strangers alike, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to face it head-on. As the weeks passed, Andre's proposals began to make real headway within the central bank and even started to gain traction in the broader financial community. His efforts to connect with each department and encourage open discussion were paying off. Employees at all levels were beginning to feel that they were part of something transformative, and the Oliveira Plan was becoming a rallying point for a new era in the financial institution. But not everyone was on board. Some members of the financial elite, who preferred the old ways of doing business, were growing increasingly vocal in their opposition. They lobbied against Andre's initiatives and used their influence to paint his reforms as a danger to economic stability. Rumors and criticisms circulated, aiming to undermine his credibility. Yet Andre remained focused, knowing that any real change would come with its challenges. One morning, as Andre prepared for another round of meetings, Pedro entered his office, visibly concerned. "Sir, I think you should see this," he said, placing a folder on Andre's desk. Inside were documents detailing a series of formal complaints from a coalition of influential banking figures. They had managed to bring the issue to the attention of key government officials, pressuring them to reconsider Andre's position at the central bank. Reading through the complaints, Andre felt a surge of frustration. He knew that his policies challenged powerful interests, but seeing the lengths to which these groups were willing to go to protect the status quo was disheartening. He took a deep breath, reminding himself of the countless people who would benefit from a more inclusive economy. Later that day, during a scheduled board meeting, the tension was palpable. Some board members shifted uncomfortably, aware of the escalating pushback from external forces. One senior board member, Senor Vasconcelos, cleared his throat before addressing Andre. "Mr. Oliveira, we're all aware of the controversy surrounding the recent reforms," Vasconcelos began. "I think it's fair to ask if perhaps we're moving too quickly. Maybe we need to take a step back and assess the potential risks more thoroughly." Andre met Vasconcelos' gaze, his expression calm but resolute. "I understand the concern, Senor Vasconcelos, but I believe that we've been evaluating these policies carefully from the beginning. These changes aren't hasty. They're necessary steps to modernize our financial system and make it accessible to everyone. And I believe the benefits far outweigh the risks." Another board member, Dona Clara, nodded in agreement. "Andre has a point. The world is changing, and we can't afford to remain stagnant while other economies innovate and grow more inclusive. We owe it to the public to move forward." Despite her support, some of the other board members exchanged uneasy glances, clearly hesitant to take a definitive stance. Andre realized that he was at a crucial turning point. He needed to find a way to reinforce his position without alienating the board members who were still on the fence. After the meeting, Andre received a call from Carla Mendez, the journalist who had previously interviewed him. "Mr. Oliveira, I've heard about the recent opposition. I think this could be a pivotal moment for your message. Would you consider making a public statement?" Andre hesitated. He knew that going public could amplify his message, but it could also intensify the backlash. However, he also realized that staying silent would allow his opponents to control the narrative. After a brief pause, he agreed to the interview. On the day of the interview, Andre arrived at the studio with a clear plan. He would focus on the benefits of the Oliveira plan and emphasize the importance of a financial system that worked for all citizens, not just a select few. When Carla began with a question about the recent criticisms, Andre didn't shy away. "Carla, I understand that change can be uncomfortable, especially for those who have benefited from the current system," he said, his tone steady. "But the role of the central bank is to serve the entire population, not just a privileged few. My goal is to create a system that's fair and inclusive, so that everyone has the opportunity to prosper." The interview continued, with Andre explaining his vision in detail and addressing each criticism directly. By the end, he felt that he had presented his case with clarity and conviction. When the interview aired, it received widespread attention, sparking conversations across the nation. Support for Andre's vision grew, with many people expressing appreciation for his dedication to fairness and inclusivity. Back at the central bank, Andre could feel the impact of his words. His supporters felt emboldened, and even some of his former skeptics began to reconsider their positions. He knew that the journey wasn't over and that more challenges lay ahead. But for the first time, he felt that he had shifted the momentum in his favor. Andre returned to his office that evening with a renewed sense of purpose. The road to change was difficult, but he was prepared to keep pushing forward, one step at a time. The day of Andre's official inaugural speech had finally arrived. The Grand Hall was filled with government officials, financial leaders, members of the central bank, and journalists, all gathered to hear the new president's vision for the future. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, and Andre could feel the weight of expectations pressing on him. But he also felt a quiet resolve, knowing that this was his moment to solidify everything he had worked for. As he stood at the podium, the crowd quieted and the room fell still. Andre looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, others wary, but all waiting to hear what he had to say. He took a deep breath and began. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. It's an honor to stand before you as the new president of the central bank. This institution holds a unique place in our society. It guides our economy, provides stability, and should serve as a foundation upon which all citizens can build their futures." He paused, scanning the room, and noticed a few skeptical expressions among the audience. He knew he needed to address the controversy surrounding his policies head-on if he wanted to make a lasting impact. "In recent months," he continued, "I've had the privilege of working alongside many dedicated and talented individuals within this institution. I've also faced criticism and resistance, some of it constructive, some of it less so. But I believe that, above all, it's our responsibility to question the status quo, to consider how we can serve not just a select few, but everyone in our society." He could see people nodding, their interest piqued, and he felt encouraged to delve deeper into his message. "My vision for the central bank is one of inclusivity. We're at a turning point in our nation's history, a time when we must decide what kind of economy we want to build. An economy that serves only those at the top, or one that provides opportunities for all. The Oliveira Plan, as it's come to be known, isn't just a set of reforms. It's a commitment to a fairer, more balanced system. Andre took another pause, letting the words settle. Then he shifted his tone, addressing a more personal note. Some of you may know that earlier in my tenure, I faced an unfortunate incident. When I arrived for an important meeting here at the central bank, I was treated with disrespect, denied entry by those who couldn't look beyond their own biases. They saw a man who didn't fit their expectations of what a bank president should look like. A quiet murmur rippled through the audience as Andre's words sank in. He continued, his voice steady but firm. That experience reminded me of the importance of this work. It reminded me of how many people face similar challenges daily, of how many are denied opportunities because of preconceived notions and systemic barriers. And it reminded me of the power of resilience, of pushing forward even when faced with adversity. The audience was silent now, fully absorbed in his message. Andre could feel their attention, the energy in the room shifting as his story resonated with them. Today, I stand before you not as a victim, but as a leader committed to change. We must ensure that our financial system reflects the diversity of our society. We must work together to break down barriers, to create opportunities, and to build an economy that works for everyone, not just a privileged few. Andre concluded his speech with a powerful call to action, urging everyone in the room to join him in creating a more equitable future. As he stepped away from the podium, the audience erupted into applause. Many people stood, showing their support not only for his vision, but also for the courage he had shown in confronting discrimination openly. Over the following days, Andre's speech made headlines, and the story of his encounter at the central bank spread widely. The officials involved in the incident faced consequences, as the public demanded accountability for discriminatory behavior. Andre's message sparked a broader conversation about equality and opportunity, inspiring others to challenge biases within their own industries. Andre knew that true change wouldn't happen overnight, but he felt a profound sense of accomplishment. His journey had been difficult, filled with obstacles and resistance, but he had remained true to his principles. With each step, he had turned doubt into determination, transforming a single moment of prejudice into a powerful movement for inclusivity and progress. As he returned to his office that evening, Andre looked out over the city skyline, feeling both humbled and hopeful. He had started a journey that he hoped would continue long after his tenure at the central bank ended, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that his impact had only just begun.